Alrighty, the Nikon Z17-28mm F2.8 lens. Let's go ahead and pre-order that bad boy. The Tamron 17-28mm F2.8 Z lens is now available.
Hey, it's a Nikon.
The Nikon 17-28mm F2.8 Z lens is now available for pre-order, but I've got a few little issues with it, including one big one. But before we get into those, let's check out the specs on this new lens. It's an FX or full frame lens. Has a focal range of 70 to 28 millimeters, all at f2.8, weighs approximately 450 grams, aperture range is f2.8 to f22, has an internal focus and zoom design along with dust and drip resistant construction, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. And just like the Tamron Sony E-mount version, has an optical construction of 13 elements in 11 groups, a 9-bladed diaphragm, along with a 67mm filter thread. Oh, and just a side note here, this is not an S-line lens. All right, so let's just talk about the pros for this lens first. It has the constant aperture of f2.8 all the way through the zoom range. It's lightweight, which makes it very good for traveling. I think this lens would be excellent for video, especially in combo with a gimbal, but not for vlogging, and we'll talk about that soon too. And it has a close focusing distance of just 19 centimeters at the widest focal length of 17 millimeters. But I've got a few issues with this Nikon 17 to 28mm f2.8 Z lens. According to the Nikon Australia website, you can vlog like a pro with this lens. When you look at your bigger vloggers here on YouTube, and I'm talking about your Casey Neistats and your Peter McKinnons and so forth, literally none of them use Nikon cameras to vlog with. So why is that? At the time of making this video, when you look at the entire current full frame Z camera range, not one of those cameras has a fully articulated screen. You ever tried vlogging with a camera that doesn't have a fully articulated screen? Well, 9 times out of 10, kind of looks like this. Okay, so I'm just out in nature. This is my favorite place to be. I'm actually on the lookout for one of these turkey mounds where they're building at the moment. So as you can see behind me, there's this turkey mound and it's just making its mound, and oh my God, I've never seen this. Little chicks are coming out for the first time. Thank goodness I'm rolling with the camera. I'm never going to get this again in a million years. But before you start going and jumping up and down and saying, well, hang on, there's the Nikon ZFC and the Nikon Z30. They have fully articulated screens. That's true. But the thing is, they're crop sensor cameras. And if you put this lens onto those cameras, you're going to get a 1.5 crop. So that 17 to 28 is going to turn into 25.5 to 42 millimeters. And when it comes to vlogging, I think anything after that 20 millimeter mark, and you end up looking like this. So that's the fantastic thing that I love about vlogging. It's being able to show you guys the surroundings here at nature. As you can see right around me here, it's just amazing. It looks incredible. So no, if you are vlogging with this lens and a full frame Z camera, then I wish you the very best of luck in framing yourself. According to the website here, the Nikon 17 to 28mm f2.8 lens is, and I quote, built sturdy, capture every moment with greater peace of mind. Designed to be dust and drip resistant, the Nikon Z 17 to 28mm f2.8 is weather sealed, so you can take it with you wherever you go, in any weather condition. But on closer inspection, have a look at this little number 2 next to the word resistant here. Okay, let's scroll down and see what that's all about. Okay, number 2, this lens is not guaranteed to be dust and drip resistant in all situations or under all conditions. and they wonder why people are switching over to Sony and Canon. When you go ahead and click on the pre-order button on the website, you're in for a delightful surprise. The lens has a pre-order price of 2,199 Australian dollars. Whoa. Hang on. Let's go and check the price for the Tamron Sony E-mount with the same specs and see what it is here in Australia. Okay, that's just under $900 difference in price. So essentially you're paying close to an extra $900 for the word Nikon and the Z lens looking external design. But it's basically the same lens. So just like Tamron's Sony E-mount versions, it looks like we're going to see a slightly cheaper version, with emphasis here on the word slightly, of the Holy Trinity of lenses, where eventually we'll probably see a Nikon 17-28mm F2.8 added to the Z lens lineup. Okay, moving on. Let's have a look at some of the Z lenses that are very similar to this 17-28 that Nikon already have on offer. After a quick search on the net for other wide-angle Nikon Z lenses, I found on average these Australian prices. You have the rather expensive and heavier Nikon 14-24mm F2.8 S lens, the super sharp edge-to-edge Nikon 20mm F1.8 S prime lens, which is just amazing for a lot of uses, astrophotography being one of them. And then there's this lens. This is my Nikon 14-30mm F4S lens. It's longer and wider in focal length compared to the 17-28. It has super image quality and I use it mainly for landscape photography. About the only disadvantage it has compared to the 17-28 is that it has a constant f4 aperture throughout the zoom range instead of 2.8. But is it really a disadvantage given today's full-frame Nikon Z cameras have internal stabilization and better ISO performance in low light, especially on the Z6 and Z6 II models? A fellow YouTuber by the name of Taylor Jackson actually did a review on this lens, and what I'll do is I'll leave it up the top here for you to go and check out. It's only a very short video, but he actually took this lens and used it in a lot of low light situations on his Nikon Z6. And have a listen to his thoughts on the f2.8 versus the f4 aperture. When you compare those lens prices I've mentioned to the new Nikon 17-28 f2.8, I think you can see for yourself there are some other wide-angle options out there when it comes to bang for your buck. Compared to the Nikon 14-30mm f4S lens, which is cheaper, has a wider, longer zoom range, I guess you have to ask yourself, do you really need that one extra stop of light? And are you willing to pay an extra $500 or more for it, taking into consideration that the 17-28mm is not an S-line lens? Well, there's lots for you to think about there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm all out of breath. I'll see you next time.